Hey there guys, InfamousAmoe again. Today we're going to be doing another, this is an updated Grux build um, that I've dubbed Gruckman Ultra. This is a bit more efficient than the last deck that I did. You didn't see that, doesn't matter, because this is better, or at least for my playstyle it works better. There's more damage output with this deck in particular, and I'm going to explain why in a moment. If you haven't seen the last one, it doesn't matter to you, just here to see the deck and understand why it works. Now I'm going to do a follow-up video on this, explaining why this works this way for all the different warriors and how that goes, but let's just get this started. Now, the way I have them set up, you take the Warlord as your prime card, because you get some damage. It's important, I suppose, for him to do more damage. He's definitely focused around that. Opposed to some other warriors, but it's generally taken on all warriors because it's just such a good card. The 100% damage bonus, that is, it's really good. Anyways, going on, for me personally, I'm missing some strike tokens. I don't have enough to do what I want to do. I normally have more strike tokens, which I got one recently in a card pack. Actually, I didn't look at that, so that's going to go in there. You're going to have all these different tokens because not every game is going to be the same. You might be in a game where there's a lot of energy damage. You don't get a little bit of early energy armor in order to deal better in ganks against them. So you might take a barrier token, or you have a health token where there's kind of a even amount of damage and you just want a general boost to your survivability. And strike tokens for when you're pretty confident with your team's abilities to kill, and for you to survive you can take strike tokens for extra damage. But damage isn't necessarily where Grux excels. We're going to get into that in a second. Now, most of you who play Warriors a lot, you'll know that typically you take more attack speed than damage, and usually won't take critical, and maybe you don't know why. Well, here's why. Or first, I guess we should describe these things in the deck, and then we'll hit why that is in a second. I take the Stalker's Key as my first item when I play Grux, because it allows me to sustain myself in the jungle without having to go back. It's an excellent item to start with. Some people will go in with a health token and 2 strike tokens, I think it is, and that will work just as well for you most of the time, but I just take it first so I can get both harvesters if I need to, because I typically find myself in situations where I'm with another jungler where I'm the only jungler getting the harvesters, and I like to be as fast as possible on that. But it depends on the game, so remember 2 strike tokens and a health potion can have a similar effect, and you can get the Stalker's Key later. Also, this will be replaced later on during your build phase, or during the game. That's a weird way to say that. Next, I get Blood-Soaked Armor, which is armor and attack speed. I don't necessarily build attack speed on it, though. I'm going to do a bit more testing and see if putting it on there as an option is a good idea in case there's not much physical damage to the enemy team, although that's unlikely right now in the current meta. What Blood-Soaked Armor does that makes it incredible to me is that you can toggle it, or not toggle it, but activate it, and it'll go on cooldown. But for a time when enemies attack you with physical attacks, so other warriors basically, they'll get bleed stacks, I believe. Yeah, it's just basic attacks in general, not just physical. But it gives bleed stack. It puts bleed stacks on them, messing up my words. Not great. And bleed is good because, as far as I'm aware, it is not stopped by armor, and it's percent damage. So even if they're super beefy, you're still going to be taking that amount of their health bar away, effectively. So it doesn't matter how much health they have, you're still going to take their health bar down by that much. So it scales in a way. Then I get a Tune Barrier for energy armor. To me, it's important to have both kinds of armor available at all times. Can really make a difference in whether you survive a fight, and it's pretty good. And if they don't build penetration, you're going to be an unkillable god, hopefully. Now, on the Windcarver Blade, at this point I'm also going to explain, a lot of people, you're probably used to seeing a ton of Flashfire Pistons on characters like Grux, Greystone. Let's see, Begmao I think has Fury available to him as well, but he's not played as much right now. And then Rampage usually has a bunch of Flashfire Pistons, even Twin Blast. Any Fury character who can use them, basically. Now the thing with Flashfire Piston, and we're going to look at it here. So it gives you 6.5 physical damage, 5.5 attack speed, and 5.5, another 5.5 attack speed. In comparison, effectively, what you miss out on Flashfire Piston versus a Windcarver Blade per se is when fully upgrade. Like, it's hard to explain, but effectively, when you build one, you're losing out on a little bit of damage, is what's happening. Even at full build with all 60 points, if you have Flashfire Piston in your card, you're still going to have a little bit less damage than you otherwise would have if you had Windcarver's blades in its place, but it's cheaper and you can get going early. That's the point of a Flashfire Piston, is to take advantage of the early game. Now, I'm kind of nitpicky, and it's totally viable to have a bunch of these. They work just fine. But my issue is that you do lose out on damage, and it's not a ton, right? It's not a ton of damage. But I still don't like to be at a disadvantage, and that's just a personal opinion and I guess play style. So don't take any mind to that. It doesn't matter that much, at least in a non-pro level of play. Anyways, so who we have here is a bunch of attack speed, and the reason you do that on Grux especially is because a lot of his damage doesn't come from the damage itself, like the abilities. For instance, on his ultimate, when he hits that, the more hits he can get off during the duration that his attacks do more and that they apply bleed stacks, the more damage he's going to do. So if you get enough attack speed, you can apply a ton of bleed stacks and you can shred any of those high health, high armor enemies, because bleed does not care about armor or health, really. So he can be a real rampage killer. He can take Greystones sometimes if they built tanky, but the issue is Greystone's revival can kind of screw him up if they have a similar damage amount. But that's not one-on-one fights isn't necessarily where Grux excels. And then I have an Assassin's Award with some penetration available, or if they don't build any armor, really, I'll get my major strike, my strike, and my other strike, and then I'll always get a penetration on my Void Steel Dagger, though I do have the other available just in case if I really feel I don't need it. But there is natural armor gain, and this will neutralize that. I Drink the Spirits, which I'll usually replace the Stalker's Key with in the late game when we already have our Harvesters up, and it's not worth messing with them if it gets that late. And it'll work as sort of a regen if I find myself having a split push, which I don't necessarily like doing on Grux, but he is pretty good at it. Now, some things you need to understand about Grux is that after a couple abilities, after his combo, he will usually run out of mana pretty fast. At least the way I build him. So often it's really important to hit with your abilities because you may not have another good opportunity to do so in the near future due to mana cost. Or it may get you to a point where if you don't complete a kill, you might die as a result of not being able to charge out due to a lack of mana. So keep that in mind when going into engagements to watch your mana. Now, as a side note that I wanted to mention, I want to point out Grux's strength, and I'm going to compare him to a character right now that a lot of people think are pretty strong. Except for in pro level play, you don't see him a lot there, but there's some reasons for that I'm going to explain. Maybe I'll say it for the video. But, point being, Grux excels at team fights because he can pull in a lot of enemies who might get clumped up. For instance, just yesterday I played a game where effectively what happened was a Gideon ulted, which doesn't necessarily completely stop enemies, but it kind of slows them down as they're trying to get out of the pool. So if you go into the sort of, not the edge per se, but a little bit into the black hole and you pull them, you can not only keep them in the black hole for longer, but you can pull them into that one spot while they're slowed, and then alt and right click, and then continue wailing on them with your basic attacks. And you can absolutely wipe a team. Like I said, that's what I did yesterday. We killed 4 of them in the black hole itself, and then we chased down the last person within seconds of the black hole ending. So we need to keep in mind is while Grux is not always the best in a one-on-one fight, if you're on even ground, say versus a Chimera, he is excellent at team fights, and that's why you'll see him in a lot of higher level play. He has a lot of utility in the form of that pull, and he can use his E to either escape or a dash past the front line and get to those backline ADCs. Alright, that'll conclude our the Grux deck for today. I'm going to continue trying to make this more efficient, and hopefully eventually we'll be able to use it and find a ton of success. This will do fine for you. I've won plenty of games with this deck. Grux is who I play the most. As long as you get used to your pulls, this deck will absolutely get you to where you need to be. I'm not going to say it's the best deck because it's not. There are probably way more efficient ways to do this. For instance, I don't think the attack speed is quite maxed, but due to item restraints on my part, I find it difficult to achieve with what I have. But if you can tweak it, I definitely recommend that. Getting max attack speed is very, very important on Grux, as I mentioned earlier. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching, and I hope you have some good Paragon games here in the future.